Hello, everybody. I'm just waiting for you all to appear on my screen. I see some return folks. Judy in San Diego, hi. I see Romaine out in Riverside or San Bernardino. Susan Wooldridge, hi. Up in Butte County.
Sherry.
And Sherry up in Auburn.
Oops.
And Gail Ronsky in LA, thanks for joining us. Great, thanks for bearing with us for a few minutes. We just wanted to make sure that we had all of our ducks in a row before we let you all in. My name is Jamie Asaye FitzGerald, and I am going to be somehow I was muted. I am here today with my colleagues, Dan Tran Kong Wen. She is our McCrindle Foundation Readings and Workshops Fellow, and she will be assisting me with the discussion part of the meeting, which I'll talk about in detail. Also here with me is Ricardo Hernandez from our New York office. Ricardo helps manage the Readings and Workshops program as well for both the East and the West. So welcome to our third virtual town hall meeting. We've had some great meetings up until this point, and I think today will be just as wonderful. Before we get started, I just wanted to give you some pointers for using Zoom during this meeting. We're going to try to keep everyone muted during the time period when we have guest speakers. So just try to stay muted unless you are asking a question. And for the Q&A period, we're going to be taking questions via the chat window. So if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a control there for chat. You can click on that and that'll open your chat window and you can type in your questions. We'll also be looking at the participants window. So if you click on that one, you can see everybody's name, everybody who's in the meeting today. And there is also a control there to raise your hand if you have a question. So please use those features in Zoom for the discussion. We'll try to visually look for hands up, but because there's so many of us, 37 to be exact, it's going to be hard to catch everybody on the fly. So we'll do our best. Okay, so we're gathered here today. It's wonderful to see people from all over California showing up for this. Hi, Devora. Devora's been here for past meetings. To talk about virtual live events, which is what is happening now because we can't be gathering in person for our usual wonderful reading events at literary centers and coffee houses and bookstores. And we also can't gather together for our writing groups, whether they happen in your homes or in classrooms. So poets and writers, in an effort to keep supporting writers in the way that we have in the past, decided very early on that we were going to start funding virtual events through the Readings and Workshops mini grants program. And this is temporary. This is, for this period. We'll see what happens after. But for now, we are funding virtual live readings and virtual live creative writing workshops. So if you're interested in applying, you can check out our new guidelines for that, and I will show you exactly where you can do that by sharing my screen with you. let's see if I can find it. Google Chrome. And we have, this is our website, pw.org. And you just have to go to the readings and workshops section. And from there, you can go to our application guidelines. And everything is here. The apply button will take you to our online application system, and the new guidelines are here for virtual live events. And all of our other guidelines are also here: eligible organizations, grants available, all of the details that you need to know to apply. And it's very simple. So Poets and Writers has been funding events for 50 years in New York State and 30 years in California. Unbelievably, it's been that long. And we really want to be able to keep supporting writers, because we know that during these times, it's been very difficult for a lot of people. And so with our very modest grants, we can at least hopefully still keep paying writers. And just so you know, the grants are very small. For readings, they're $50 to $350, and for writing workshops, they're $50 to $500, depending on how many sessions there are and what populations you're serving. All of the application forms are exactly the same. An organization still has to apply on behalf of a writer. However, there are some changes with funding for virtual events that you should know about. We've shortened our application window to 4 weeks before the event takes place, so you can apply that early. If you're sort of skirting that 4 weeks, please reach out and let me know that you want to apply, because we might be able to make an exception depending on where we are in the grant schedule. So 4 weeks in advance of your event is when you should be applying. And we've waived the matching requirement. So for California, that's great, because in the past we have strongly encouraged organizations to match what they ask of us. So that is now no longer required. And I think the only other kind of big change is when we do send the check, normally we would send it to the sponsoring organization before the event, so that the project director could give it to the writer at the event. But because we're all sheltering in place, we are mailing the checks to the writers directly approximately 2 weeks after the event has taken place. So that is a small detail, but important to know. So that's really the extent of the major changes to the guidelines. I want to encourage you to apply for the funding. We have a little bit of money still available for California, and we really do want to give it to writers. So please don't be afraid to apply. It's not like applying for a big NEA grant or something like that. The application process is very, very simple. It's a handful of online forms that you need to fill out and submit, and that is it. So if anybody has any questions about applying, you can put those questions into the chat and we'll try to address them at some point during the Q&A. And you can also email me directly and I will help you out. So I am going to introduce somebody wonderful who I invited to share with you today his experience conducting his decades-long writing group workshop via Zoom. So Michael Kearns is an established theater artist with a track record in teaching writing to a variety of populations. recovery, LGBTQ, female-centric, HIV/AIDS. He founded QueerWise nearly a decade ago. QueerWise would encompass those various categories while throwing in a caveat, 50 plus. At the time, Michael felt there was a dearth of writing classes in the LGBTQ world for older members of the tribe. QueerWise thrived and other writing groups joined the fray, so they recently opened their doors to include some younger members, making the successful spoken word writers group intergenerational. Kearns' teaching philosophy is based on creating an environment of absolute safety. No one judges, including especially the teacher. He says, I'm not after some phony, baloney, saccharine environment, but one can lead or criticize thoughtfully and lovingly. So here with us today is Michael. He's going to share some of the challenges and the benefits he's experienced transferring his group from an in-person group to an online group. And he also has kind of a unique take on things because he's a theater artist and a performer. And so he's going to kind of talk a little bit about how that has been woven into what he does. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much. And thanks to Poets and Writers. I mean, I think that, you know, Jamie, you referenced the amounts of the grants, but it's much larger than the amount of money. I think it's the reinforcement of the fact that, you know, we have some talent getting those grants. And I know that for me, it's been a bolstering aspect of my career to be granted by Poets and Writers and to have that consistency. So I thank you and I appreciate it. And I just wanted to say that probably on behalf of many of the faces I see in the little boxes. So yes, I taught QueerWise in a room, Terry Wolverton's space, well, various spaces, that's where we happen to be now, which has the standard oblong table that everybody sits around and, you know, you can share popcorn and look in each other's eyes and rub shoulders and get a sense of each other visually by looking at body language and all those good things. And then suddenly we're all like we are right now here and trying to grasp who these people are by just seeing, you know, heads and shoulders. So it is different. However, I went into the Zoom situation knowing the people. So that's a big difference. I'm not transcribing who they are fresh like I am most of you. I'm trying to figure you all out just on that bare minimal information I'm getting from your faces and very little tiny faces. So it's that part is certainly challenging, I think, if a new person would come into QueerWise now, I think it would be a bit of a challenge. However, it's not impossible. You know, you can gather a lot by someone's facial expressions and how they relate to the other people and how it's a little bit more difficult to, for instance, what I'm doing now. It's a little bit more difficult for me to try to look at all of you, give each of you equal time because my eye has to go, you know, my eye has to be constantly surveilling. I can't look at the room really and gather what's going on. I have to sort of zero in on people. I have to see who's restless, who's bored, who's excited, who's enjoying it, who's not. I mean, I try to do that. I try to track the students' involvement as I'm teaching. This would be a large group for me. Usually I only have the most 20, 18 would be a lot. So there's certainly, I'm not going to say there isn't an adjustment. What I found a lot of advantages, you know, aside from the big California advantage is not having to get in your car. And that is an advantage. I mean, people are in a better humor when they arrive at the class. And because they've arrived from their living room or wherever they happen to be, and they just seem, you know, to be more relaxed and more in a mood to write. So that's huge. And they're more timely. That's another big one. You know, They can't use the excuse. It's like the cat ate it. It's traffic. You know, that's the big excuse in my experience in LA in terms of writers being late for class. Oh, the traffic is we'll leave earlier. But you know, it's the next week, it's still the traffic. So they can't use the traffic unless they're coming home from somewhere. So that's nice, you know, that they're there on time. My attendance in terms of weekly is up. It's gone from, normally I would say it's in the vicinity of 8, 10 people, sometimes 11. It's now up to more closer to 20. So it's 17, 16, up higher, considerably higher. And that's been consistent from the Zoom meetings. It's been consistent. So it's been 5 weeks or whatever. So I'm thrilled with that. Another thing that I pointed out, I haven't experienced this yet because we really haven't gone for it as much as I think we can, but the diversity issue. You know, we're constantly, for 10 years, I'm not kidding, for 10 years we've aimed at more diversity, and we've tried and we've tried and we've tried. We really have tried sincerely. We've had members call people, we've had members visit places, and we have done okay. You know, we constantly had a pretty even amount of men and women. That was not easy. It was primarily men at the beginning. So we conquered that. We then have gotten X number of Black and brown people. Not enough. So, you know, now we're looking for more trans people. But now I think that this medium, I call it a medium, will allow us to have more diversity simply because it's easier for people. And some people live further out. You know, some populations don't live in Silver Lake. Hello. You know, everybody thinks writers live in Los Feliz and Silver Lake. Well, they don't. And so people might have a hard time driving from X location into Silver Lake who can now Zoom. So we're really going to pursue the issue of diversity. I was telling Jamie, there's some theater company, she'll remain nameless, but they were casting a play, and the play literally called for people of color to be in the play. And they announced the cast, and they had a picture of the cast, and they were all white. And it was a Zoom production. Now, can you imagine? I mean, this is ridiculous. Of course they could find people of color on Zoom. It's ridiculous. They could go to the country that the people were called upon to be cast in the play. They could go to the Philippines, or they could go to South America, or they could go to Russia to get the actor if they had to. But they're here, they had all white people. So it's, you know, we have the option, the opportunity to diversify our writing groups if we wanted to or chose to, which I think is quite amazing. You know, you can go wherever you choose to outreach to. So that's kind of a thrilling thing. We don't have to wear our masks when we're yes.
Michael, I'm sorry to cut in, but I'm having some feedback on your audio, or like a little static. I don't know if you have some headphones you could pop in, or maybe if you sit a little bit back from the computer, it might pick up a little more cleanly.
Could it be this paper, maybe? Is it better now?
It's better now.
Hello. Oh, it could be the paper.
I think maybe something's doing something.
I'm so sorry. It's much better now, or it's considerably better?
Yeah, it's better. It's better.
Oh my, I'm so sorry. Should I say everything again? I'm kidding.
No, it's okay. You can we could hear you. It was just like some crackling or something.
Oh, I bet that's what it was. I bet that's what, I see. I don't think of these things, but now you learn. Now I'll never put paper on the, you know, it really is trial by error, because I don't think of these things. I would never think in a million years. At the minute you said it, then I looked down and I saw the paper and I thought, oh, it's the paper. Stupid. Okay, so what did we say? Oh, I was saying no masks. You don't have to wear your masks in the Zoom meeting, so that's an advantage. No shoes. You don't have to wear shoes. I like not wearing shoes. Yes, increased membership. Yeah, now this is something that I found. Oh, well, like Jamie just did. She showed that document. I don't. Sometimes I do prompts, and sometimes I do visual prompts. So I would more likely do visual prompts. You know, a painting, a photo, whatever. So it's easy to do a visual prompt where they're not passing it around the room, although there's something fun about passing it around the room. But even a poem, you know, that's short enough that you could have one image of a poem. So that's fun. That's exciting to switch up the prompts so they're not all just a word or a sentence or whatever. That's a nice aspect of the Zoom meetings. Yeah, share documents. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, so attendance is up, timeliness, I said. Oh, here's some things that aren't so good. You know, they tend to want to eat because they're at home. So there's a lot of eating. I haven't become the taskmaster about that yet, although I do see it each week. It they're upping their diet they're bringing more food. I can see now they ate in the. I didn't have a lot of rules about eating in the class, the outside class, maybe a few rules, but now you can see that in the privacy of their home, there's something about being entitled to eat. You know, I'm going to tell them what they can eat in their house or that they can't eat in their house. It's stretching it a little, but I'm going to, because there's the sound element. If their mic's turned off, the sound isn't an issue. But it's just there's something rude about it in my mind. But I'm old, so there is a shift there in manners, certain rules. I think I haven't enforced yet because I haven't settled on them yet. I don't know. You know, is this appropriate for me to make an issue out of? Does anybody care? I don't know. Are they happier when they're eating? Yeah, little things like that. Here's something that I find perhaps one of the most interesting aspects. Um, we do some pretty probing prompts that are psychologically, emotionally, whatever word you want to use, difficult and deep, let us say. And I try to go some days, some weeks, certainly about this virus. We've had some very heartfelt, complicated, nuanced prompts. And there's, you know, resistance and all the things you can imagine, but then usually people come around or they don't, or they'll come around the next week if we sort of repeat or go in the same direction. They ready themselves for it, I guess. But an interesting thing is I thought this isn't going to work in this Zoom situation. It's too cold. It's too detached from each other because I felt that they relied on the warmth of bodies next to them and the warmth of just the human connection in the room. They knew each other and they could feel that. How wrong I was from the get-go of doing, now it could be the subject matter, you know, the virus, the pandemic is so close, but I don't think so. I watched them very carefully because I can watch them when they're writing. You know, they usually write 20 to 30 minutes, and I can then zero in on each person. And I watched them very carefully, especially this first time because I was trying to ascertain what their affect would be when they were writing. And I think, because it played out in subsequent sessions, that being in their own home allowed them to go deeper and more comfortably within themselves. Now, this isn't from every single one of them, but there was something about the intimacy of their own space that seemed to make the process easier somehow, in terms of the regions of the soul, if you want to call them that, but allowed something that didn't exist when they were in the room with other people. And I found that fascinating because it was the opposite, absolute polar opposite of what I'd imagined. So then the next week, same thing. We were following up. We actually did the virus for about 4 or 5 weeks, still doing it. And same thing happened. It wasn't an accident, or it wasn't just that first week. It was the same thing where the intensity and the intentionality of the writing was deeper, was more focused and more complex when, as a result of doing it on Zoom in their own home. That sort of private, in acting they call it a private moment. They were having these private moments of writing as opposed to writing in the room. Now, I haven't, I think I briefly mentioned it. I don't like to point out what's going on because sometimes like that, because I think then it sort of breaks the spell. I'll talk to some of them about it individually, maybe, because I think it's an interesting thing to look for. Sometimes there's a collective sort of consciousness that happens. I think even it could happen in this situation, especially if they've known each other for so long. So it might not happen if you do it. I don't know, but it certainly was vivid and something I obviously like about it. So that was exciting. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's going on at Skylight Theater. As Jamie pointed out, that's the other aspect of my career, and it's another aspect of Queerwise. Queerwise, probably some of you have readings, or you have done readings with your groups, or whether formal, informal, some degree thereof. Skylight Theater, I'm an artistic associate. And we've been doing every Thursday, sort of creating this new theater form, which is creating 10-minute plays, which have been done now for several years, live 10-minute plays. Now we're doing them, creating them specifically for the Zoom format, so that the plays are created for boxes like this. There'd be like 2 people, but they would not be acting as if they're in one room. They'd be on two different formats, speaking to each other as if they're speaking to either a psychiatrist or the situation would be organic to the Zoom format. And I'm not being very clear, but I think you probably understand me because you're also smart. Anyway, we're doing 10-minute plays, but we're also doing Queerwise is going to do 15 minutes. They have to be short. That's one thing. We've learned a lot. We've done 8 weeks of these things. I don't know what you call them. And they have to be shortish. So, we're going to do 6 readers, and we're going to do the theme will be the virus. And those pieces will be co-joined in some way that has a cohesive format. But we can usually have up to 6 of the boxes that we see here. So it's something to think about in terms of doing readings or doing whatever it is you happen to do, whether it's poetry or readings of essays, material, whatever. It's really a new, innovative way to present material that I don't think is going away. I mean, I think it's just going to get more popular. I think that audiences like it. They like it for some of the same reasons I've mentioned. You don't have to go to park and drive, and you can see your friends who are doing reading. Whenever you tell your friends you're doing a reading, you can see them groaning and rolling their eyes. And this makes it so much easier for them to go and not groan and roll their eyes. They get to just sit in their living room and turn the computer on, So it's kind of nicely accessible for people to see your work and your students' work. So I think it's going to be, I think a lot of this that we're experiencing, including like this right now, here and now, is going to be the future. I don't think it's going to only be what happens. I think we're going to still go back to the classroom, and we're still going to have meetings in person. But I do also think that we're going to be incorporating a lot of this, just because there are aspects of it that are so doable and so positive. I mean, I'm not some tech guy, believe me, but I do think that there's a positive aspect to a lot of this that I wasn't open to at the beginning. Believe me, I really wasn't. And that's what, 8 weeks ago. And I've just learned to be involved and take to it. I'm not going to put this on my computer. I'm making sure. How many, I was curious, how many of you do have readings as part of your curriculum when you're teaching a workshop? Hands? Kind of, sort of? Yeah, good.
Should
Okay.
we open it up for Q&A now?
I'm totally up for that.
Yeah, I think it's time.
Okay, good.
So we've got a bunch of questions in the chat, and then again, I'll just reiterate that you can use the raise hand function in the participants window. And my colleague and co-host Dan Tran is going to be helping to moderate the Q&A period.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to start with some questions that were submitted through email by Karen Lewis. There are two. Best practices for how to balance participant voices versus the presenters. It can be complicated with too many people trying to share at the same time on Zoom. And then her second question, what are some ways to share reading lists, handouts, writing prompts beforehand?
Well, reading lists, and I think that you can do it the way Jamie did it pretty much. They're not going to be able to copy those. So those would have to be emailed, I guess, separately. If you'd have an email list, I think you could show them initially and then either provide an address, a web address, however you could get them on the web if that's possible. Otherwise, if they have to be a hard copy, they'd have to be mailed, and if they could be emailed, they could be emailed. It's a little complicated, but I don't think it's impossible to somehow communicate, who wanted them. It'd just be logistical. I don't think, we certainly didn't have any problem because there were rules laid out about nobody having their mic on during the lecture or I hate to call it a lecture, during the speech, during the friendly, uplifting speech. So nobody cross-talked. In my career-wise class, nobody really does. I mean, if they have something urgent to say, they'll raise their hand. I mean, that we pretty much established that, and they pretty much follow it. So no one really is interrupting. I mean, these are adults who are pretty polite toward each other. So raise their hand if they have something that they have to say, that they're, I understand that if they're emotionally entangled in something and they need to say it at that moment, it's fine, raise your hand. But otherwise, there's no really, if something gets heated, there might be, and then I say, fine, let, people cross-talk in meetings outside of Zoom. So you just handle it the way you would handle it. I don't think it's any different.
So this question is from Kat Campus. Do you find participants are going into Zoom overload?
Yes, a bit. I mean, it depends on, sometimes I have 3 Zoom meetings in a day, almost back to back, and you do get like, because it requires another kind of energy. I don't know how to describe that, but if it's more energy than in person, it's a different energy. And I think now there was a honeymoon period. Oh, isn't this fun to see everybody's face in a little box? And isn't this, but now there is an overload. I mean, I hear people joking about it, like, I gotta go to a Zoom meeting. But like, I don't feel that at all about this. So you break it down. It's like other meetings, you didn't like to go to this meeting and you did like to go to that meeting. So I don't think it's much different. But I do hear people saying that they're overloaded with the Zoom meetings. I don't know.
So this question is from Jillian Wegner. Is there an optimal length for a virtual workshop?
Now that's a good question. I mean, I do a Sunday morning 3-hour workshop with 6 people, 3 hours, 6 people. And it works. I mean, we have a break. We have about a 10-minute break. And they're intense people who, again, they know each other and been working together outside of Zoom with me for at least a year. So there's a cohesion among them. And I thought it might be problematic because of the length, but it's not. So there's an example of something that works. If you asked me that question and I didn't have that group, I'd say a little bit shorter is better, not more than 2 hours. But there's an exception to the rule right there in my own experience. So I think there's a lot of these questions, I think, that depend on the age group, the age range, the familiarity of the participants. Have they never been in the room together? Are you starting a brand new group? I think that has something to do with how long you could work with them in a session. I'd probably start with a shorter session if it was a brand new group, and then add, maybe start with an hour and then go to an hour and a half if you felt that they were able to do that and concentrate and you were getting out of the experience what you wanted. It's really variables because teaching writing is just such a subjective thing. You have a relationship with each of those students, and each of those students develops a relationship with each other, a little more difficult under these circumstances. But there's a lot of emotion flying around and a lot of thinking and a lot of intimate experiences going back and forth inside and out. So it's hard to prescribe, oh, it should be an hour because it's on Zoom, or oh, it should be an hour and a half. I mean, I think it's a question of feeling out what's going on in the room to some degree. I mean, I know you have to announce some kind of time frame, but then I think it's a question of really paying attention to your students, to how you relate to the Zoom experience. Maybe you feel that you can only do an hour. Well, then only do an hour. Maybe you feel like you can do 4 hours. I don't think you will, but you know what I'm saying. You do, I said this earlier, and I think it's true. I do think you have to, there's a different attention span you have to employ on Zoom. I don't know if that's more attention. I know it's a different kind of attention span.
Okay. So the next question is it's pretty related to what you're actually just talking about, but I will say it is from Devore and Major. How long do you have participants write? What role do you play in that time? Do you ask people to share? Do you volunteer or pre-pick people?
Okay. It's pretty formatted. Come in, I give them a prompt. I talk very little about the prompt. I don't explain it much. Sometimes it's a word, a sentence, an object. I like using objects, or a photograph or a rendering of a painting or something. Here's one I did recently, which I just love. Can you see this? You can sort of see it. This is a picture of a David Hockney painting that he did recently, and it's called "Do Remember They Can't Cancel Spring." And of course, it's about the virus, and he painted it in response to them canceling all the things. Remember at the very beginning when they started canceling this and canceling that and canceling everything, and he painted it around that time. And this prompt was just his title of the painting. Do remember they can't cancel spring. You're welcome to steal it. This was in the New York Times, this painting. And I had no idea. I mean, I knew it would get a good response. I knew it was a good prompt, but I had no idea what the response would be. It was overwhelming. I mean, I start to cry. It was just an overwhelming response. And so then they write for about 20. I gauge the room, 20, 25, sometimes depending on how many are there and what they look like as they're writing. And sometimes 30 minutes maybe. And then they're highly encouraged to share whether they want to, but I never make anyone share. So generally speaking, they all share. I mean, there are rare occasions when they say they don't want to, that's fine. But they share. Then I'm the first to talk about the work. and then everyone else can talk about the work. They don't, not everyone talks about everyone's work, but if they have something they feel is important to say, they do. It can't be framed in a negative way. It can't be, you should do this, or you should have her wear a red dress instead of a white dress, or you should have had him leave 5 minutes earlier. Or, it should be none of that. You should. It ideally should be, if you have a question about something, if you didn't understand something, you can address that. But no prescriptive, you should. I don't do that. So, and that's it.
Okay, so there's another question from Kat Canvas. Are there any techniques that you utilize to break the flatness of the screen, i.e. humor, exercises, group participation, that you have found work well for this medium?
So funny, you should ask that. And this evolved from a party that we did at Skylight, and that was, we did this as, I guess you could do it at any given moment, but we had people who were coming to a cocktail party who didn't know each other on just like this format. And you at the cocktail party, you're drinking a cocktail and you're looking at each other and seeing each other's clothes and talking about what you did that day. And this, you had nothing. So we had people we told them in advance, so they had that, but you could tell your students in advance. Have each person show something from their apartment or house that they liked, that they really loved, or that, in this case, it was something that was magical, because the theme was magic. So you could have a theme. It could be magical, it could be childhood, it could be a photograph, it could be whatever you chose, but to show something. So in other words, you could say, oh, okay, so mine would be this pencil sharpener. So I would show this pencil sharpener and I would tell you something about it. Somebody gave this to me about 20 years ago, but it was, 30 years old then. So it's probably about 50 years old at least. And it's just beautiful. I mean, I just love this pencil sharpener. So it's on my desk, and that's all I'd say. But you get a sense of me, and you get a sense of dimension, and so that's one idea right there. I don't have any others, but I probably will eventually. But I sort of came up with that one. So it's your way of introducing yourself beyond, I'm Michael Kearns and I'm a writer and I wrote this and I wrote that and I wrote that.
So one question from Ingrid Lundquist.
A long question? How long? I don't have much concentration. Did you say a long question?
Oh no, I said there was a question from Ingrid Lundquist.
Oh, okay.
Do participants write during the workshops? What do you show on the screen during the writing time? How long is the writing exercise?
I think I sort of answered that. They do write during the workshop, and they write from 20 to 30 minutes. And what's on the screen? Nothing, just each other. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I suppose that's a good idea. One could put something on the screen. I don't put on music. I'm pretty, I think that they should be with, as of now, I think they should pretty much be with their thoughts. If the prompt was a photograph, like the daffodils, I never even thought of that. I didn't even probably know I had that capability at that point. That's something I've learned along the way. I might put that up for the writing prompt while they were writing. I don't know. I didn't think of it. I didn't thinking of it right this minute. So that might work. Or maybe for 5 minutes of it. I think they want, even though what I said about the privacy of their own home and the intimacy, I think they like seeing each other on the screen, even in the boxes. I think they like seeing each other. I could be wrong about that, but there is something about seeing your comrades writing even that makes it a collective, that makes it a community, even though you're not touching them, you see them. Like I feel like I am seeing all of you much better than I did 20, 30 minutes ago. So I feel some sense of knowing you a little more than I did just from watching you. So you see what I'm saying? So I don't want to fancy things up too much because of Zoom. I think that's a danger. I would perceive it as a danger, but I'm old. I'm sure 20-year-olds would probably have things flashing and, lights going off and on and dance music. I'm kidding. But, they probably would have more bells and whistles than I ever would. And I wouldn't teach that way just because I wouldn't.
So this is a related question from Karen Yelton Curtis. How might the online format be more or less challenging for younger writers?
Well, I think it would be less because they're so used to being online, and it's just part of their consciousness is to be on that computer. So I think they'd have a far less issue with being taught online, and they probably would come up with much more creative content or ways to, I don't want to say more, because I think that, there's an advantage to a 30-year-old teaching you how to write, and there's definitely an advantage to a 70-year-old teaching you how to write. It's just a different consciousness, a different set of, different toolbox, a different set of ideas and notions. I'm sure the 30-year-old has things to teach that I don't have, about certain things in the world and certain mores and certain, so that would be a value, and then forget Zoom or in person or whatever. So I think that's applicable. The computer itself, the device, is going to be more familiar, likely, to a younger person, and they're going to be able to incorporate things quicker, generally speaking, than an older person, and they're going to be able to do things with it that are probably, although I know a lot of older people, myself included, who do things now that they never thought in a million years they would be doing. So you got to keep up here in the world.
So this is a question that you sort of touched on, but I will say, from Brett Jones. Do you have suggestions for helping participants to get to know one another and trust each other?
It's a hard one. There are all those kind of trust exercises. I've never done any of them, but especially when I have a room and I'm in, as I said, I've never done, I'm probably going to before the summer's out. I've never done a Zoom class with people I haven't worked with before previously. So I asked me this question in a couple of months. I don't know how that will happen. I have some arrogant trust in myself. I think that I'm able, if I trust what's going on, and if I develop a trust with each student, then it will kind of happen. Now, am I going to be able to gain the trust of each student in this manner? It's going to be harder. I part of what I do is with each student is look in their eyes and listening for the writing teacher. To me, listening to the student, whether they're reading their work or just talking to me, is probably one of the most important aspects of teaching, is to have the writing student know they're being heard. Now, are you going to know you're being heard in this format as well as in person? I don't know. I'm going to sure try. We'll see. And that's what develops the trust. As I said earlier, it's the individual relationship that I have with each student, and then the relationships that they have with each other, and then the relationship that they have as a collective with me, which sometimes gets dicey. And then you have trust comes from that. It's not just one trust issue. It's a conglomeration of trusting that has to occur. And it wanes and it goes in and out. And some weeks it's more trusting than other weeks. And you have to go with that sort of flowing situation. So I'll be put to the test, and it's my responsibility. It's part of the teacher's responsibility to create that trusting environment. And you can't always do it. You can't always hit a home run.
So this is from Jamie. I've heard from colleagues that the online writing workshops during this time have been a lifeline, especially for elders. Have you had any feedback from your students about this?
Yes, a lot of feedback. They're so grateful that they have something to do, somewhere to go. I could probably, if I wanted to, And now I'm sort of sharing the responsibility with another teacher. I could probably add a night because of that reason. They're lonely. A lot of them live alone, and they are just thrilled. They say, I don't know what I would do without this. Now, I've heard that in the past, but never with such sincerity and such heart. They don't know what they would do. This is the night they look forward to. I mean, it's kind of heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time, but a lot of them don't. I mean, this is the Monday night is the night that they look forward to because they're creating, and there is a camaraderie because of course they know each other. So, you know, in the first 5 minutes or so before I start, they're talking back and forth. And what movie did you see? Did you watch TV? Did you read a book? Whatever. So yes is the answer. Absolutely.
This question is from Marty Williams. As an instructor, do you communicate with participants in between sessions, or is the Zoom workshop pretty much it?
You know, I try not to do that because it just gets out of hand. So if I did it with one, then I have to do it with 8, and that, you know how time consuming that is. So the truth is that I do it maybe with a couple here and there, but I'm very deliberate about it and very careful to not step on toes and to make sure that it's, you know, that there's a reason for it. You know, sometimes I will do it, but I try to keep it, you know, when we do a show, we do shows now. We've gone from readings to Broadway shows practically. But no, we did, you know, we did spoken word readings where people just got up and read. And now we sort of do performative stuff. So during those times, there's a lot goes on between the Monday and Monday. That's 2 or 3 weeks for each show. And now we're down to 2 shows a year. But a lot goes on in between then, but that's a rare occurrence.
This question is from Jim Natal. Do you charge for your online workshops? If so, how is that fee handled?
I do. I charge with well, yes is the answer. The fee for my Sunday class is handled a little differently. It directly goes to me, but they go to me, and then they're by PayPal, by satellite, I mean, by all those different things, PayPal, Zelle, Venmo, you know, so it's horrible to have to track it, I'll tell you that. So I have somebody in QueerWise who tracks it for me. And then with the 6 students on Sunday, I pretty much track it. So it's just a question of knowing who's paying and what they're paying and who's getting a discount and who comes for free. And I'm too lenient. But I want people to write. And I want people who have no money to write.
Well, thank you so much. I think that was our last question in the chat, and we're almost out of time. Thank you so much, Michael.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity to talk to people.
Yeah, I know that there's a wealth of knowledge right here in this group. Some of you already teach, are probably already teaching online. I wish that we had time to kind of open things up, but I don't want to keep you too long. I did want to share with everyone quickly some resources that I will also send out in a follow-up email. I've shared these in each meeting, so some of you have already seen them. So I'll just very quickly share them if I can find them here. Hang on one second. I'll just kind of give you the highlights. Here we have our COVID-19 Relief Fund. These are things that Poets and Writers offers. And the Relief Fund is helping writers who are facing extreme need at the moment. And they are small grants of $1,000. And right now the application window is closed, but there will be another round of funding, and I think that's going to be announced sometime next week. So if you're curious about what this is about and how folks qualify to apply, you can check this out. Be sure to check out all of the other resources we have online, from our databases to our submission calendar. There's a great article called Resources for Writers in the Time of Coronavirus that our editorial staff is updating on a regular basis. And this has a lot of resources, financial and otherwise, for folks in the literary community. I wanted to bring your attention to an event that is happening tomorrow. Our editor-in-chief, Kevin Larimer, will be talking with someone from Kickstarter about how writers can use Kickstarter to launch their literary projects. I think it's probably going to be a great conversation and very informative. So if you're interested in that, this is the link to join. And I am going to pop that into our chat for anyone who wants to copy it or click on it. And with that, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Dan Tran. I hope all of you found some interesting advice today and can use it. And I am wishing that we could meet in person very soon. But in lieu of that, this will have to do. So be well, be safe, stay inspired, and stay posted. We may be doing more of these in the future. I'm going to be brainstorming with my crew about what we can do next. And if you have any ideas about that or things you'd like to hear us talk about or present, please email me those and email me any feedback you might have. And I would love to hear it. I'm putting my email address in the chat for you. So thank you, everybody, and be well.